right, it's going to be a great group tonight. We've got some great things to talk about. Thanks for joining us. Briefly, we're going to go over a few things today. Here are the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about who we meet on the other side, and the other side meaning after death. Also, why we might want to leave the angels that we meet, what that means, and where this YouTube channel got its name. So thanks for joining us tonight. It's going to be a good one. My name is Curtis Childs, and I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation. And the Swedenborg Foundation is a nonprofit group that is just trying to get Swedenborg's ideas out into the conversation to see if they can do some good in the world. And we're reading through right now Swedenborg's book, Our Life After Death, which you can download for free if you want. This is we made you like a short link here if you want to like manually type that into the computer. If that feels daunting, just go to the description on the YouTube video, expand, open for more. There should be a link there that you can click that, get a free PDF or free ebook of it so you can follow along, or go to Swedenborg.com and find it under new releases there. All right, so that's what we're going to do there. But before we start, let's get in the right mindset. Swedenborg talks about how the kind of frame of mind that we're in, what's going on inside of us, actually shapes the way that we process information. And so let me take you on a little journey of Swedenborg's setup of the mind very briefly. He says that the heaven and hell are constantly trying to influence our minds, and that we're kind of like a radio antenna, but that we can actually shift which one we're tuning into. You know, the negative thoughts and feelings being hell, the positive thoughts and feelings being heaven. So if we work at it, we can actually shift. And what I want to do is give a couple little pointers on this shift tonight. One thing that Swedenborg says is a hellish tendency is the desire or the need to be superior to other people. He can sometimes refers to it as love of self. We want ourselves to be better and to have more than other people. So if we can push that out, we're blocking that negative channel up, and that opens the way for the good things to come in from what Swedenborg calls heaven, which two I would point out are humility and usefulness. And humility is not just humility as in, oh, I'm not cooler than other people, but also intellectual humility and admitting that, as he puts it, what we know is next to nothing compared to what we do not know. And even me, like I've read Swedenborg stuff before, but if I come into it saying, okay, well, how do I know this really knows that I really know what this means? So it's just a cool way to keep humble. And then usefulness is this idea that you're getting information in order to help. So if we're going in here thinking, how can I help? How can I grow as a person to be more helpful to others? How can I use this info to comfort someone, to help them, to turn them on to something they might like? Then that's bringing the heaven side in. So if we can do those things, we can maybe even get more out of this than we would. Either way, the text will provide us the opportunity. So pull up your PDFs. Let's get in there. Hopefully you're able to find some. We're starting right in the middle of a chapter. We're on page 18 because last time we actually stopped not only in the middle of a chapter, but also the middle of a journey where Swedenborg is describing what it's like to be revived in the afterlife. So let's dive right in here. I was in particular allowed to perceive and even to feel that there was a pull, a kind of drawing out of the deeper levels of my mind and therefore of my spirit from my body. And I was told that this was being done by the Lord, and it is what brings about our resurrection. When heavenly angels are with people who have been awakened, they do not leave them because they love everyone. And so I want to say a couple things about that sentence. First of all, he says heavenly angels, and that isn't just a pleasant description, like, oh, I'm going to call them heavenly. For Swedenborg, all those terms have a specific meaning. In brief, there are three levels in our minds, he says. There is what he calls the natural, the spiritual, and the heavenly mind levels. And the natural is kind of the more superficial part of us, kind of, ego concerns, that sort of thing. And then the other two levels successively open deeper and higher. And Swedenborg is saying a heavenly angel is someone who is open on that highest level and open to the influence of God and of heaven coming in, and so they gain wisdom from that. So when he says heavenly angels, that's what he's talking about. And he says that they love everyone. And love and angels, in any account of a spiritual experience, always go hand in hand. There's this overwhelming feeling of love. There's not a lot of stoic angels or a lot of intimidating angels. There's always this love that's pouring out of them. And Swedenborg touches on it, but I find that you can go through his stuff and not quite get the emotional impact that you can get from current accounts of them. So I wanted to take a look at a little clip of a guy describing his near-death experience with angels, so we can get a little of what it really feels like for someone, and that can inform us as we look through the rest of Swedenborg's accounts about what it's like.
Two angels came, and on each side, and huge, humongous, very wide, very tall. They would get the height of the tunnel, and they just said, "Don't worry, you're okay. All's well. We're here with you, and we love you."
So yeah, that message of love and care, it goes hand in hand, and it's the same thing Swedenborg is saying, but that's what it looks like through a person. Like you can see in that guy that it's done something to him, that message, and hopefully one that we can all kind of take into heart. So that's what it's like when you hear him talk about angels here. So let's get back into the PDF. When heavenly angels are with people who've been awakened, they do not leave them because they love everyone. So we said that, and moving on. But some spirits being us, anyone who's awakened in the afterlife is a spirit. Some spirits are simply unable to be in the company of heavenly angels very long and want them to leave. When this happens, angels from the Lord's spiritual kingdom arrive, through whom we are granted the use of light, since before this we could not see anything, but could only think. So there's definitely some things that could be said about that sentence. Before I say either of them, though, I want to say that you can participate in this discussion by leaving your questions and comments. If you're watching it on YouTube, just leave them in the comment section there. Or if you came from Facebook and don't have a YouTube account, go back to Facebook where you found it, leave comments there. We'll try to find them and we'll try to pull them up because I want to hear what you guys have to say. And I'm sure that there are stories of angels. I mean, a lot of people have had some kind of encounter with what they would call, an angel or a guide or a being of light. And so I'd love to hear those. That's one thing. Then back to what we read, that some people can't be around heavenly angels for too long and want them to leave, which is an interesting statement because you would think, who would want to leave angels? They sound like they're awesome. They sound like they're kind and they're intelligent and they help and they care about you. But this is going to be a theme as we read through this that Swedenborg describes this progression sort of where we kind of select out if we're just like, okay, this is too much love, or I'm not quite ready for this, or as you'll see getting on, some people don't like the angelic lifestyle, which is the angelic lifestyle is selflessness, love for others, thinking about their welfare, not being puffed up with ego. And if that's not the kind of life that we built in the world, then we don't like it. We don't want to hang out. And we'll see that more. But so let's get back to the text and see how that progression goes. Actually, before we do that, I did want to mention this thing about the spiritual kingdom. He says the angels from the Lord's spiritual kingdom arrive. Remember, before I talked about heavenly kingdom. And that spiritual kingdom is that second level up. So these angels are people who have not been opened on the third level, but have been opened on this second level, or have a different sort of reception that are a little closer, while still like really what we would call evolved or enlightened or whatever, but a little closer to how we are now. So for some people that can be more comfortable. So it's all about finding out who we can vibe with, and angels will come to provide that kind of guidance based on what we need. So it's about us and accommodating to us, and it's really sounds like a pretty gentle and cool sort of process to go through as we get accepted and welcomed. So there's the meeting with angels after death, and that everybody, doesn't matter, good or bad, everybody is met by angels after death. And we've seen somebody, Swedenborg, this is Swedenborg describing his own experience with it. So we've seen somebody, you start initially with these sort of really deep angels, and then you move away from those, you get to spiritual angels, and he says that it has to do with gaining sight. So let's talk about it a little more. I was also shown how this is done, this being if you look up here, we're being granted the use of light and being able to see in the spiritual world. I was also shown how this was done. It seemed as though the angels rolled back a covering from my left eye toward the bridge of my nose so that my eye was opened and able to see. And I want to talk about this phrase right here. So you are watching these videos on a channel, YouTube channel, that's called Off the Left Eye. And that phrase, it comes from this text right here. That was the initial impetus to give the channel its name, and it was picked for a couple of reasons. Here it's shown that this appearance of the cover being pulled off is part of this kind of spiritual awakening, this ability to be able to see or comprehend spiritual things. And then also that the left eye, Swedenborg writes elsewhere, has to do with intellectual sort of things, and that this YouTube channel, which the Swedenborg Foundation is putting out, is trying to communicate ideas, and that we take the left intellectual side, and then it's our job to do sort of the right side, and the actions and the love. So trivia, that's where that came from. Okay, so let's get back and see how the light comes in. To the spirit, it seems as though this were actually happening, but is only apparently so. And if you get into Swedenborg's description of the spiritual world, he often talks about appearances. And there'll be things which are sensory realities. You can see them, you can hear them, you can feel them, but he differentiates them from reality, saying that some things are just appearances. They're sort of like a representation of the deeper side of what's happening. So you have this covering being peeled off, not that there's actually a spiritual, physical covering on the eye, but that this is a symbol of the enlightenment that you're being given. So he'll often talk about appearances. As this covering seemed to be rolled back, I could see a kind of bright but diffuse light, like the light we see through our eyelids when we are first waking up. It seemed to me as though this bright, diffuse light had a heavenly color to it, but I was later told that this varies, and varies according to an individual person. After that, it felt as though something were being rolled gently off my face. And once this was done, I had access to spiritual thought. So this rolling off of something of the face is an appearance, and we just talked about that, and it represents the fact that we are moving from physical thinking to spiritual thinking. And so since he said that, Swedenborg said that thought and feeling are kind of what make up the spirit, and in the spiritual world, they're what make up the appearance of the world around you. So this transition from thinking, sort of more superficially, the way we do in the world, to this sort of spiritual, deeper way of thinking, you see this peeling off, which is symbolic of the opening of the mind, because there the face is an image of the mind. So there's this whole system of images and correspondences that all kind of intertwines and works together. And if you can read that was how Swedenborg could gain a lot of his knowledge, was understanding this language. And it's one that we can actually learn here, but more about that another day. Angels take the greatest care to shield the awakening person from any concept that does not have love in it. They then tell the individual that she or he is a spirit. So it seems like we're being cared for there, both on a sort of a spiritual, physical, or metaphysical level, like they're going over the processes in your mind, making sure you have loving concepts in the mind, but then they're also communicating with you. They're saying, hey, guess what? You're here. You made it. Yeah. You are where you think you are. And so that's just a little nuance of that there are a couple levels going on simultaneously. And here you kind of get him, these are sort of the bullet points, he's saying, oh, this is how it goes. But remember back to the guy who was giving the little presentation that we saw, where he's talking about the encounter, and that it's this moving, loving encounter that completely changes people who have had any kind of exposure to it. So it's just good to keep that in mind. All right, that's been me talking for a while. Let's take a break and see what's on your mind. So we have a couple of questions or comments lined up. Let's take a look at the first one. This is from YouTube. You make all this very accessible and put things in the language of today's generations. Are you working on a book of your own, from the best of your writing, from the videos and other things you do? So that was probably from my mom or something like that. I appreciate it. That's a great compliment. And there are a couple things that go into this stuff being accessible. I would think, first of all, the translation that we're reading. A lot of people at the Swedenborg Foundation worked really hard to get this thing as readable and current as possible, and that was at Swedenborg's goal too. He wrote in Latin back in the day, which Latin was like the English of the day. You know, it was sort of the universal language, but his Latin was remarkable because of how simple it was. However, because he was trying to get it so that anybody could read it. The problem is Latin doesn't translate easily into English. It's, you know, things he can say simply in Latin are complex in English. So, and he's giving really complex subjects here. So there's been a lot of work going into that, and I've benefited from a lot of studying and learning from other people. And that you find initially with Swedenborg that the concepts seem complex, and the concepts. Did I just say the concept? So, and the terminology seems complex, the ideas. But once you start to understand what they are, they're concrete enough and they make enough sense that you start to put it into your everyday language. So that's what I've tried to do here, and I hope that's working well for you. As far as me working on my own book, not right now, but if anybody, 2 more people say that, then I will. I don't know. I appreciate it. Definitely something to think about. And there have been a number of good books explaining Swedenborg's concepts, and a lot of them are free downloads on Swedenborg.com, which is Swedenborg Foundation's website, just to try to get that same thing. Take these cool ideas and get them modern, and how do you understand them? So let's go to the next question. YouTube. What does Swedenborg say about after-death communication from loved ones and coincidences, and how we can know we have received a message from the spiritual world? So that's a good one, and certainly a lot of people are wondering about that. How do we know if the people we care about have communicated with us? And I do hear coincidences come up a lot, and coincidences are an interesting thing because, oh, why would that happen right then? And you sort of think, if there is this spiritual world and there are people on the other side that are caring about us, and is that how they'd communicate? I'm going to try to think of what does Swedenborg say about all of that. He certainly says that our loved ones are on the other side and that they want to communicate with us. I mean, as I've said, I think on the previous episode, he had an experience where people in the spiritual world through him could see people in the physical world, and they wanted to tell their loved ones that they were okay. So, and if you just think about it, you know, if I died and people that cared about me were sad, I'd want to comfort them and say, hey, I'm all right, I'm okay, yeah, I'll be fine. So there certainly is the will there. As far as coincidences, I mean, Swedenborg says that divine providence, or this is the government of God, is everywhere. It's in every detail. So there wouldn't be a coincidence that was meaningless. As far as whether people are coming through that or not, I don't know, but I would think so. He doesn't talk about coincidences being caused by loved ones to reach out. I think actually the conversation around angels and after-death communication has grown so much since his day, when it wasn't really talked about as much, that there are these more nuanced personal questions. So I wish I could just say, yeah, man, everything that you think is a coincidence from your loved one is, and Swedenborg says so, but he doesn't say it doesn't, and he may have more about it in there somewhere. He's got a lot of material, but I would generally say if it feels like somebody's talking to you, you know, that's not something to ignore. So there's my inadequate answer. Okay, we have one more question before we. Does it help to pray for people? According to Swedenborg, the greatest thing that prayer does is, remember at the beginning we mentioned that the traits of heaven are, one of the traits of heaven is humility, and that Swedenborg says prayer is not to, you know, convince God that God is so great. It's to introduce humility into us. That's what it can do, because obviously God is already working hard, doing as good a thing as He can. But as for whether it does help somebody, like if you say, okay, we've given them all the treatment we can, now all you can do is pray. I don't know if Swedenborg commented on it directly. I would think there's a chance, because I mean, physical effort can certainly lead to help, and you'd want to do that. You know, you don't want to just pray, you want to do that, of course, but thinking of someone and putting that is effort of another kind. So whether that can trigger something, whether it's just helping you or helping them, I'm not totally sure, but it's a good mental exercise to acknowledge the existence of a higher power, and just to be putting those good vibes out. Like, I want to help this person, and if I have nothing else I can do, this is what I'm going to do. So another inadequate answer. Let's get back to the text. If you're just joining us, we're reading through Swedenborg's account, our Life After Death. You can download it at the link in the description of this video and read along. All right, so after the spiritual angels have given us the use of light, they do everything for us as newly arrived spirits that we could ever wish for in that state of being. So, they're taking care of us as much as we'll let them. They tell us about the realities of the other life, or at least as much about them as we can grasp. And I'd point out that a lot of near-death experiences, people will say, oh, I had all the answers to any questions I ever wanted. And that you could just, anything you ask, it's there. And this sort of seems to describe a similar process where there's this deluge of knowledge. Okay, you want to know what are dinosaurs like? What was going on at this point in history? Why do we go through suffering? All these kinds of things, you can get it. And so that's what it's sort of describing here. However, and this is this journey that we return to, if we are the kind of people that do not want to be taught, then once we are awakened, we want to get out of the company of angels. Still, the angels do not leave us. Instead, we leave them. Angels really do love everyone. They want nothing more than to help people, to teach them, to lead them into heaven. This is their highest joy. And this is kind of the crux of Swedenborg's heaven and hell. That everybody, the angels, God, want everybody in heaven. But nobody is forced to do anything, much like life here. Nobody is forced to do anything. So you have sort of this, if you don't want to be taught, nobody's going to force you to be taught. So you can move away. Initially there were the heavenly angels that he mentioned. Now it's the spiritual angels, and they want to talk. But if you're like, all right, get away from me. I don't want to hear about it. What else is there here? You can move away. But the angels are never like, okay, we don't want you here. Get out of here. This is it's up to us. It's always going to be up to us. Just like our life now is up to us. It's not going to be there that all our decisions are made for us. So it's a continuation in a way, and really something that we put our effort towards choosing the path for. I also want to mention that he said at the end of that paragraph that to help people, teach them, and to lead them into heaven is angels' highest joy, and that he says that heaven is a state of mind, and to be an angel you have to have this mindset where we all have the things that kind of make life worthwhile. Like what are your primary joys, or what are your sources of joy? What are your favorite things to do? What really motivates you and gets you going? And that the angelic mindset is this. Oh, my favorite thing is to help people, to comfort them, to talk to them, to teach them, and to lead them into heaven, which is to lead them into happiness. And that's the mindset that gets you in heaven. So he's always dropping these kind of philosophical sort of mindset things along with the description of events. Okay, so let's get back here and continue the journey. When spirits leave the company of angels, so this is spirits being everyone who dies, and you're given the option to leave if it's like, okay, I'm not quite ready. They are welcomed by the good spirits who are accompanying them and who also do all they can for them. So you're kind of going down in levels. He talks about the heavenly angels, the spiritual angels, the good spirits. These are all nice people, but just less opened up, or less enlightened, or less deeply angelic. And so it can be a lot to be around that great love that comes with the highest or the most deep angels. So it's like it's basically you get to choose your comfort level and say, okay, I need to back off from that. But here, the good spirits, Swedenborg calls them, which are, you probably know people on Earth who would be like good spirits. You know, that this is really nice people, friendly people that you can trust, who have your best interests in mind, and but closer to what the state of mind that we're living in now that we can mesh with. So this is why some people come back to that. So, and these good spirits are also doing everything for us after death that we can get to. However, if they, meaning you, me, anybody who goes to the next life, have led the kind of life in the world that makes it impossible for them to be in the company of good people, they then want to get away from these as well. And Swedenborg talks about sort of spheres of life, and that as we live here, we're kind of developing a sphere of life, and that in the other world, that those auras or whatever you want to call them can clash. And if you have, because here, you know, you can be on the train and you're a decent person, and the person next to you is contemplating some heinous crime, but you would never you wouldn't know, because the physical reality doesn't reflect that. You know, there's no pushback, there's no different. But spiritually, there would be this you know, these are magnets that repel each other. You know, that's what would be happening there, and that sort of, if you're in the next life and your spiritual food, you know, what really gets you going is something that's opposed to this kind of mutual love that you find there. You don't want to hang out. That's not your scene. Nobody's pushing you out, nobody's handcuffing you, but you're just like, okay, I want to take a break and do something different. And that's how you kind of continue, and you see people are sort of self-selecting as they go through this. This happens as long and as many times as necessary until they find the company of people that their earthly life has fitted them for. Here they find their life, and remarkable as it may sound, they then lead the same kind of life they once led in the world. And so there's kind of this initial period of like waking up and everything's euphoric and you learn all these things, and then you come back down to earth a little bit, that you kind of, you know, you get back to like really where your comfort zone kind of was in life, and you actually, as he says, start having a sort of a similar life. And this is not a permanent state, but this is just all part of our development as we make this transition into this new sort of reality, and that there's enough similarity between this world and the next one that we kind of get back into a groove that we are here, because that's the fertile ground to really dig deep and make the progress we need to make to hopefully go upwards into bigger and better things. The first stage of life after death does not last more than a few days, though. This first stage. So that's just everything we've described up till now. In the following pages, I will be describing how we are then brought from one state of being into another, until finally we arrive either in heaven or in hell. This too is something I have been allowed to learn from a great deal of experience. So we've already sort of seen that journey a little bit. You know, you see the refusal of heaven if that's not your scene, and this was something that Swedenborg got to see firsthand and kind of learn about. But it's not like you're there and there's you know, you get arrested, or there's a judgment and okay, you're going here, you're going there, where's your record? This is very much based on what you want, what you're comfortable with, and what you've cultivated, the attitudes that you've cultivated. But it's not rigid. You notice it's just like, oh, okay, you don't want to be here. We'll kind of move you here. Where do you want to go? How long do you want it to take? You know, that it doesn't seem harsh to me. It might to you. That's fine. It seems like relatively accommodating and soft. Let's take some more questions. If you're just tuning in, we can all talk about this together. You just gotta write comments either on the YouTube comment section, or if you came here from Facebook and want to go back there and write a comment there, we'll try to pick them up, and we'll hear what you have to say, because who knows, you may have had an experience and gone through this process and know more about it than I do, and in that case, you owe everybody telling them what's really up. So let's get to the first question. This is from YouTube. My son contacted me 3 days after he was killed by cell phone. His phone is on 4-digit lock code that I can't unlock, and I still can't break it. So yes, they can contact us. So that's cool. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And that's, you know, it's a heavy thing. You know, to lose a child is a big deal. So I appreciate you being willing to tell your story, and that's cool. And it's cool to think, yeah, the technology is not something that is, you kind of think of like, oh, the spiritual world or spirituality is like, there wouldn't be technology, or it wouldn't really interface with our technology here, but everything in this world is a reflection of the spiritual world. That's what Swedenborg says. And so it must be that all this wonderful stuff that's allowing us to have this conversation now is a reflection of something that's analogous on the other side. And so that's an awesome story, and thank you for sharing it. And it must be really cool to have that kind of reaching out happening to you from somebody who I'm sure you miss a lot. So thanks. I love it when people share their stories here. Let's get to the next. My father contacted me after his death more than once, and also from my mother. So this is another story of contact. And I just think it must have been so awesome for you to have that confirmation and that relief. But think about also for the people on the other side, your mom and dad. That must feel good for them to be able to tell you, hey, it's all right, we're here, knowing that how that will affect you. And to everyone else who's out there and hasn't had that kind of communication, take heart, because I've noticed that not everybody, even people who have lost people that they love a lot, we don't all necessarily get that kind of contact. And I'm sure it's for a good reason. But so in the meantime, I like to take comfort from people who have had that kind of communication and kind of know that, all right, eventually I'll get all the contact I need, but it is real and it does happen. So let's do one more. My mom contacted me in a song, and this is from YouTube. So this is lots of people have had these experiences. I mean, obviously we've got a crowd who's very into these kinds of things just because that's how you found this show. But to have supernatural experiences is, I would say, maybe even the norm rather than the exception, because not just near-death experiences, but things like this we're talking about, contact. And I'm not sure exactly how that song Contact happened, whether it's a song that came on right at the right time, or you heard something in the lyrics, or the song was different or something, but I bet it was awesome, and thank you very much for sharing. Okay, we'll do a few more questions or comments at the end, so if you're just joining us, leave yours in the comment section here, and then we'll get to it, and I'll be able to hear from you as well. Let's hear what Swedenborg has to say about the continuing journey. I have talked with some people on the third day after their death, when the events previously described have been completed. So this whole thing that he's talking about takes a couple. It's not actual days, but it's analogous to days, because he says space and time are different on the other side, but he tries to put it in terms we'll understand. So that whole thing is a process that takes a while. Then you end up in that state. I talked with 3 whom I had known in the world, and told them that their funeral service were now being planned, so that their bodies could be buried. When they heard this, they were struck with a kind of bewilderment. They said they were alive, and that what was being buried had been useful to them only in the material world. And you do kind of get this, and if anyone out there has had a near-death experience, or if you've ever watched people describe them, you'll see that there is kind of this, I don't want to say indifference, but there's not a lot of grief and trauma at the idea of being separated from your body. People will describe like, oh, I was looking down at my body, and it almost comes off as relatively light or unimportant. And I'm going to show you an example of what I'm talking about right here.
As I looked at my 29-year-old body, I felt as though it was just a piece of clothing. I had a fondness for it. I knew it. I had used it well, but it was time to go to the Salvation Army.
And I think that just speaks to how much the spirit is really us. That even the body that you've been wearing for a long time, once it's gone, you don't feel like I'm not me. I'm not me without it. You very much are you. So that's what these people are expressing. That Swedenborg is describing. It's what people are expressing now in their experiences. So it just may be the case, which is nice to think about, considering how the body starts to deteriorate even while we're still alive in it. Later on, they were quite amazed at the fact that while they had been living in their bodies, they had not believed in this kind of life after death, and still more that this belief was shared by almost everyone in the church. And when he says in the church, Swedenborg is talking about the Christian church of his day, I think Protestant church in Europe at the time, and there were a lot of different. When he says they were surprised they had not believed in this kind of afterlife. But back then there was a lot of thinking that, in the afterlife we were sort of ghosts or waiting in the ground. There was not. It maybe wasn't as prevalent as it is today. This idea that right when you die, you go and you see relatives and you're a person, already again. But there wasn't that, and this has come about in a lot of ways from the near-death experience phenomenon. But that back then there was kind of this widespread doubt concerning that, and that people get there and they're like, why didn't I know that it was like this? And so that's just kind of part of the emotions you would think that we'd all have going through something like that. There'd be some human stuff like, but why didn't anyone tell me? So returning in for the last paragraph of this chapter, we kind of wrap up this initial part of the journey after death. Of course, Swedenborg has a lot more to say about the paths we take in the afterlife and what kind of positions are there and what life is like there. But this is just a little summary that we've gone through here today. Again, I really appreciate the contributions that all of you have made in hearing some of your stories. So this is just going on to talk a little bit about the shock of learning that there is an afterlife, if that's not what you were expecting. Some people during their earthly lives have not believed the soul had any life after the life of the body. And I would like to stop and say that when he says here, the soul, not believe the soul had any life after the life of the body, I think the soul more meaning consciousness, that because he'll talk about right when he was alive and writing Swedenborg in the 1750s and after. That's when he was publishing his spiritual works. Sort of, it was right when science was really starting to come into its own, and the religious kind of answers to things were being questioned. So a lot of terminology that we would now probably call consciousness was still called the soul. The alive part of us. So that sentence, it's not people saying, "Oh, we have a soul that's non-physical and it doesn't survive death." It was just kind of the word for our thoughts and feelings, our consciousness. So that's that people thinking that there's nothing after death at all. So that's what he's saying there. When they discover that they are still alive, they are deeply embarrassed. So it can be a little embarrassing to be wrong about it, but hopefully you're embarrassed but also pumped because, hey, what I thought would be nothing is actually this really cool thing. However, people who have convinced themselves that there is no eternal life join up with others who think similarly, and they move away from people who had lived in faith while on earth. Most of them link up with some hellish community because such people reject the divine and have no use for the truths of the church. In fact, the more that we convince ourselves that the eternal life of the soul cannot be, the more we convince ourselves that nothing to do with heaven and the church is real. And again, he's using the term the church as religious philosophy, but also an internal state, as we've discussed in previous episodes. So there he's kind of saying that disbelief in spiritual thing, in one spiritual component like life after death, sort of piggybacks with, or enables other disbelief, that you just kind of sort of reject this whole idea of there is life after death or anything. And in a very interesting twist, he's saying that even the mindsets stick with you. So if you were, and I would say not like, okay, I'm not sure or something, or some kind of healthy skepticism, but becoming obstinate and kind of investing your ego in this idea that no, there's nothing, and I know what's going on. That doesn't just dispel when you've been shown, oh, there is life after death. That the human mind can really convince itself, and that you kind of want to disprove things after you've been shown them. So it's just good to keep an open mind, I think, is the message there. Let's take a look at a few more questions here before we wrap this thing up. Free will. Even in the afterlife, we still have free will. So that's from YouTube, and there's this whole big thing about human free will, and do we have free will, and what is free will like? And it does seem like in the afterlife we have free will, because he definitely describes, okay, we're here with angels, we can choose to move away from them, we can choose to move towards them. I would say there's always free will. That Swedenborg actually says that we kind of picture free will as something separable from human life and consciousness, but Swedenborg says that free will is like that you couldn't have an independent thinking consciousness without free will. That can never be taken away from us. You always will have free will. That's one of the essential components of humanness. And so you have it in the afterlife, but it's a little different because when we're here, we kind of have more of a chance to sort of restrain our will, if you will, because we can we sort of have this exterior life, that I'm here and I'm talking to you on the camera like, oh, this is great, I want to teach you about this, but if inside I'm thinking, oh, this is so stupid, I don't want to be doing this show at all, when am I done? Those are two different things. If I can kind of fake one thing on the outside while I have a different thing on the inside, which can lead to a lot of painful situations for people, but it's actually good for our spiritual development because it gives us a chance to amend ourselves, that because you don't just blurt out the first negative thing you think, and you don't just do the first negative thing you have an impulse to do. You can kind of restrain yourself and act in different ways and kind of, but in the spiritual world, there's not that duality. You sort of, you really go with whatever you think and feel right then. So it's a different free will. You don't have as much control. So that's why it's really good to get spiritual work done here, get your kinks ironed out better, so that it's easier to restrain yourself, and because it's a harder process on the other side. So there's that Swedenborgian wrinkle in free will after death. Okay, let's get to the next question from YouTube. I've encountered angels hundreds of times. Their love and wisdom lifted my own, and often the experience was healing. But only a handful of times did they have a message or advice. Is this normal? So thanks very much for sharing your experiences. I would say that sounds cool. I wouldn't mind seeing hundreds of angels, but I'm happy for you that you saw yours. And then as far as advice, good question. Thinking about near-death experiences that I've read, I think that often if people do get a message, it's not like sell your car. It's you're loved and taken care of. It's not specifics on how to live your life. And Swedenborg does talk about that that generally angels won't teach us what do you want to call it, doctrine or spiritual concepts, because that needs to come from us doing our own research. That there's sort of a free will thing there. They won't interfere with that. So that may be why we don't get a lot of you don't get a lot of angels saying, hey, believe this, hey, do this. That there's actually this sort of, there's a comfort thing there, and there's a opening up your, hey, we're here, but it's not this sort of command. So that's what I think. If anybody else is on YouTube and wants to respond to that person and tell them what their angel experiences have been like, you could definitely do that. Okay, there's so much more that I wish I could say about all of these, but I'm trying my best, and thank you for your awesome questions. Let's get to two more here at the end. Where do atheists go after death? That's from YouTube. We never know where anybody's going to go after death. As Swedenborg says, there are any external action can be completely different based on your internal motivations. You could be an atheist because you could say, I'm looking at the world, look at organized religion, look at all of the scandals that have happened because of it, like the sex abuse scandals, and look at all the religious wars that have happened and the policies that are being made based on religion that aren't helping. This is not a good thing for people. I care about people, so I'm going to reject all of that. And so there's sort of this external rejection of spirituality or that concept, but there's this internal acceptance of love, and that love is God in form. So that if you have that, oh, I like love, then on the other side you are interested in being filled in, And Swedenborg says that there are some people who are very religious or have done all kinds of spiritual learning and have those concepts down pat, but they have an interior life of hostility and evil, and that they run towards hell because they They don't, it's really, we don't know what is going to happen with anyone based on just one trait. That's between them and God, and it's really about your acceptance of love. So I think that it's too hard to lump all people who profess a certain belief in or non-belief into a category. That's my take on it, based on sort of my study of Swedenborg, and that you're probably looking at a difference, because when Swedenborg uses the word atheist, he's often talking about that rejection of love sort of side, because he'll talk about it in relation to behavior, rather than the concept. But so that's it as I understand it. Thanks for the question. All right, let's do one last one here. I have a question. This is from YouTube. When we die, you said we either go to heaven, which is at the top, or hell at the bottom. Who would want to go to hell? Please give an example of that kind of person. It's a great question, and I'll try to answer it as I think Swedenborg would. There's sort of a traditional concept of heaven and hell, which is that heaven is bliss, happiness. You get everything you want. You're in a great place. You're around God. And hell is torture. You're there, and people are just like hitting you and burning you and slashing you, and that's what it is. But that's not the hell that Swedenborg describes, and that's not the heaven that Swedenborg describes. They are both places and states of mind. And that heaven is the mindset of loving other people, desiring their own happiness, and not wanting to be better than them, looking to make sure everyone's happy and to give what's yours to other people. Hell is loving yourself over anyone else and taking from them whatever you think would make you want to be happy, and living for your own pleasure and your own gratification. So somebody who would choose hell would be someone who says, I don't care, I want to be happy and I want my desires gratified. I don't care how that affects other people. I don't care how it makes them feel. You have some people who their joy, they get pleasure out of hurting other people, and they pursue that out of cruelty. Or there are some people who get pleasure out of prestige and being more powerful and commanding people, and those are the pleasures that people chase into hell. They say that's what I want, and that you can't. If you want that, if you want to exploit people, if you want to be better than people, if you want to harm people, or if you are hostile to anyone when they get in the way of your happiness, you have no fun in heaven. Swedenborg says people like that can't even breathe in the atmosphere of mutual love that's there. So that is the kind of pleasures people would chase to get to hell, because that's the kind of pleasure that's in hell. It's not like when you're in hell you get that. When you're in hell, it's as he describes it, if you're somebody who enjoys hurting people and you rush down into that place because that's where that pleasure is, you're around people who are like you. Right? So you're going to be feeling, just as you're inflicting harm on people, people are going to inflict harm on you. And that in hell, it's God is still operating there, making sure that there are limits so people can't get at each other too much, and trying to get people to keep from getting worse and getting them to do little things, and making sure that if they bad things are happening to them, it's only for their eventual benefit. So that's hell, and everybody has a tug towards hellish things. Like, of course, everybody else, there's times when, oh yeah, I'd like to be superior to other people. There's times when somebody cuts you off, or somebody does something to upset you, and you burn with revenge against that person. Those are the little tugs of hell. But it's just not. It's about letting our humanity trump those, and saying, okay, I'm upset right now, but I understand that there's something bigger than this, and putting yourself in another person's shoes. That's how we refuse those and let in the heaven that we showed in the very beginning. So we've come full circle. And I want to end today with a segment that I call Correspondences. We do this every week, which is an activity where we look for the deeper meaning in the objects around us in the world. Swedenborg says that the natural or physical world is in a way a canvas where things are painted that illustrate the soul. So you have things in nature that represent deeper realities. And today we're going to look at birds. And this is a good day for birds because you can see I wore my bird uniform. And Swedenborg says that birds are symbolic of ideas or concepts. So how this was going to work today, we're going to look at 30 seconds or so of different images of birds. And if you can picture the deeper reality of something while looking at the physical image of it, you can gain insight and kind of get deeper and get sort of these epiphanies and connection to that, or that's what Swedenborg says anyway. You can try it for yourself. So we're going to look at these pictures of birds, and as you do it, think, how is this illustrating the human mind and thoughts? You know, that Swedenborg describes that people who are getting their act together spiritually become like birds that are soaring high, like when you have that vantage point and you can see what's below you, you know, in your lower self, the things that are in your mind and heart, and you can tell, okay, this is what's good for me, this is what's bad for me, and you know where to land. And that's kind of like a picture of the intellect when enlightened, the soaring bird. And there are other ways that birds can represent it, and I'll let your sort of intuition pick out what they might be as we look at these images. And remember, picture the mind and ideas as you see the images of birds. If you have any thoughts on that, on the bird images, leave a comment. I'd love to hear, like, how does that affect you, or with any of the other correspondences that we've done. And as I always say, you don't need to look at pictures of birds online. Go look at them in the world. You know, how do they act, how do they behave, and how is that like a concept or an idea, and how is that image there? Okay, thank you guys so much. Before we go, if you want to support this program, you can donate to the Swedenborg Foundation. It's a nonprofit 501c3. It's tax deductible, and we actually have a matching grant program, so your PayPal donation will get matched 5-to-1 and help go to getting this show out to other people who might be interested and might find it useful. Open the description of this video. There's a link to where you can donate on the YouTube description of the video. That's where you can donate. Thanks very much for that. We're going to be back again next week. It's been really great having you guys here. As always, I'm impressed with the questions and the comments, and it's fun reading it afterwards. If you are watching this not live and you have a question or a comment, you know, leave it there, and we'll either try to get to it in next week's show. Some of these, a few of the first ones this week were from last week, so we'll do it then, or I'll get back to you in text. Thanks, you guys, for watching. Join us next Monday at 8, and we'll be back learning more stuff. Thanks, you guys.